My wife sent me a simple text, "Making my girls' trip a week longer, don't wait for me." On the surface, it was innocent, but a gut feeling, a cold knot in my stomach, told me something was deeply wrong. So, I replied with a sentence that I knew would change everything. I wrote, "No problem. My lawyer finds these situations quite interesting." Her panicked calls started instantly. And they didn't stop. This is the story of how one calculated text message unraveled a web of deceit so deep, it threatened to destroy everything I thought was real. The perfect wife, the perfect life. It was all a lie. Before we dive into how I discovered the truth, do me a huge favor and hit that like button, subscribe to Ken's Story, and ring that notification bell. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a gut feeling you just couldn't ignore. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to you. All right, let's go back to the beginning. Back to when I still believed I was the luckiest man alive. Our life was built on the limestone bedrock of Austin, Texas. We lived in a beautiful modern home I'd designed myself in a quiet neighborhood nestled in the rolling hills of hill country. Mornings smelled like fresh coffee and the sweet scent of jasmine from the garden Ashley insisted on planting. To our friends, we were the gold standard. Jake and Ashley Miller, 10 years married, more in love than ever. I'm a structural architect. My world revolves around logic, solid foundations, and meticulous plans. I build things to last. Ashley, she was the opposite. She was the vibrant, effervescent force that brought color to my black and white blueprints. As a social media marketing manager, her life was about creating a narrative, and the story of us was her masterpiece. Her charisma was magnetic. She could walk into any room and leave with 10 new friends. I was the steady anchor. She was the brilliant kite soaring in the wind. It worked. Or at least I thought it did. We were that couple, the ones who hosted the best backyard barbecues, who still held hands during walks around Lady Bird Lake, who people pointed to and said, "I want a marriage like that." Her annual girls' trip was a sacred tradition. A week away with her 2 best friends to recharge. I never questioned it. In fact, I encouraged it. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? This year's destination was South Beach, Miami. She packed for days, laying out designer bikinis and cocktail dresses, her excitement palpable. She talked non-stop about the restaurants they'd try and the clubs they'd visit. Looking back now, there was a different kind of energy around her this time. A frantic, almost desperate edge to her excitement. I dismissed it as her just needing a break from work. I see now that I wasn't just naive, I was willfully blind. I wanted to believe my own foundation was solid, that the life I had so carefully designed was built to withstand any storm. I kissed her goodbye at the airport, told her I loved her, and went back to our perfect empty house, never suspecting that the woman I married was already gone. The first couple of days were quiet. The house felt unervingly large without her energy bouncing off the walls. I buried myself in my work, spreading blueprints across the dining room table where we usually ate together. I told myself I was being productive, but really, I was just counting the hours. And just as I expected, my phone started buzzing. The Miami updates had begun. Her Instagram feed became a masterclass in manufactured fun. It started with the obligatory airport photo. Ashley, flanked by her friends Chloe and Megan, all holding up boarding passes and flashing perfect smiles. The caption read, "Miami bound. Sun #girls trip #South Beach." I remember smiling, texting her to have a safe flight. Then came the check-in at a ridiculously trendy South Beach hotel. A boomerang video of 3 champagne flutes clinking together, the turquoise pool glittering in the background. Tagged, of course. Every few hours there was something new. Ashley laughing on a beach towel, sun perfectly hitting her face, not a single grain of sand out of place. A story panning across a plate of expensive-looking seafood with the caption, "Living our best lives." Followed by a blurry video from inside some thumping neon-lit nightclub on Ocean Drive. Each post was a carefully curated postcard of joy, and I was the primary audience. I'd send back little replies, "Looks incredible," or "Don't get too sunburned," playing my part as the loving, supportive husband back home. Looking back, it's sickening. I was liking and commenting on my own deception. Every tag, every photo, Every cheerful caption was a brick in the wall she was building around her lies. And I was handing her the mortar. She was performing for an audience of one, and I gave her a standing ovation every time. For 72 hours, the performance was flawless. She seemed happy, her friends were right there with her in the pictures, and the illusion was perfect. I had absolutely no reason to suspect a thing. Then, on the third night, a single tiny detail, a detail that never should have reached me, slipped through the cracks of her perfect story. And it was the beginning of the end. It was Wednesday night, around 10 p.m. I was at my desk, wrapping up some work and doing the boring but necessary task of paying a few bills online. It was a routine I'd done 1,000 times, a mundane part of managing the life Ashley and I had built together. I logged into our joint credit card account, expecting to see the usual charges: groceries, gas, and a series of transactions from Miami restaurants and shops. And I did. But then, one line item caught my eye. It didn't fit. The charge was from a place called Prime Cut Steakhouse. The amount was $482.50. My first thought was, that's a steep price for a girls' night out. But it was the location that made my blood run cold. Coral Gables. Now, if you don't know Miami, you need to understand. Ashley was posting non-stop from the heart of the party in South Beach. Coral Gables is a world away. It's quiet, it's luxurious. It's a 45-minute drive without the chaotic Miami traffic. It's where you go for a romantic, intimate dinner for two, not for a wild night out with friends. My mind immediately started searching for a logical explanation. Maybe it was a fraudulent charge. Maybe they'd used a car service that was based there. Maybe it was a deposit for something later in the week. But the timestamp on the transaction was 8:37 p.m. I quickly pulled up her Instagram. At 8:45 p.m., she had posted a video of her and Chloe doing shots of tequila at some loud, crowded bar on Ocean Drive. The music so loud it distorted my phone speaker. The two locations were miles and a world apart. She could not have been in both places at once. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the two screens, the fun, carefree video on one side and the cold, hard data of the bank statement on the other. One of them was a lie. For the first time in our marriage, I let a sliver of real doubt creep in. A single hairline crack had just appeared in the foundation of my perfect life. And as an architect, I know that a crack, no matter how small, is a warning sign. It's a sign that the entire structure you've built your life on might be fundamentally unstable. I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house and the loud, frantic beating of my own heart. The next day, the day she was scheduled to fly home, was agonizing. I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The image of that credit card statement burned into my mind. The house, usually my sanctuary of order and peace, felt like a museum of a life that might not be real. Every photo of us smiling on a shelf seemed to mock me. I found myself pacing from room to room, picking up my phone every few minutes, then setting it down again. I was caught in a horrible limbo. I desperately wanted to call her and demand an explanation, but I was terrified of what I might hear. Her social media was quiet all day. After the non-stop flood of posts, the silence was deafening. It gave my mind too much space to race, replaying the timeline, the locations, the impossibility of it all. I tried to work, but the blueprints on my screen were just meaningless lines. The only structure I could think about was my own marriage, and the crack that was widening by the hour. Her flight was due to land in Austin at 6:05 p.m. By 6:30, my phone was still silent. I told myself there could be delays, turbulence, a dead battery. I clung to every last rational explanation, but the knot in my stomach tightened with each passing minute. Then, at 6:48 p.m., my phone lit up with a message. It was her. For a split second, relief washed over me. Then I read the words. "Hey babe. Having the best time. Decided to extend the trip by a week. Don't wait up. Love you." I read it once. Then twice. The cheerful tone, the casual exclamation points, the flippant "don't wait up." It felt like a slap in the face. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made with her girlfriends over brunch. This was a calculated move. The suspicious dinner in Coral Gables, the social media silence, and now this. It all clicked into place. This wasn't an extension of a vacation. This was an evasion. She wasn't running towards more fun. She was running away from coming home. In that moment, the hurt and confusion I'd been feeling all day hardened into something cold and sharp. The loving, trusting husband vanished. And the architect, the man who analyzes structures to find their breaking point, took his place. I held the phone in my hand, my mind suddenly crystal clear. She had made her move. Now it was time to make mine. I sat there in the quiet house, her careless words glowing on my phone screen. Every instinct screamed at me to lash out, to type back in all caps, demanding to know who she was with, to call her a liar, to vent the hurricane of betrayal and anger that was building inside me. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard, ready to unleash a torrent of accusations. But then I stopped. A voice of cold reason cut through the emotional storm. It was the voice of my best friend, David Chen. David's not just my friend. He's a ruthless divorce attorney. We'd had drinks a few months back, and he was telling me about a particularly messy case. I'll never forget what he said. "Jake, in a battle like this, the first person to get emotional is the first person to lose. You give them all the power. You have to play chess, not checkers." Her text was a reckless move, and a furious reply would be an equally reckless countermove. It would let her paint me as the crazy, controlling husband. She could twist my anger into an excuse for her behavior. I couldn't give her that. No, I needed to play chess. I needed a move that she would never see coming. A move that wasn't emotional, but surgical. So, I deleted the angry paragraphs I had drafted. I took a deep breath, and I began to type a new message, choosing each word with the same precision I used to design a support beam. I started with, "Take your time." It was disarming, feigning an indifference I did not feel. It would confuse her. She was expecting a fight, not a permission slip. Then I prepared the kill shot. I typed, "My attorney David finds these stories fascinating." The words felt heavy, dangerous. Using David's name made the threat real, not some empty bluff. The word stories was intentionally vague, a blank canvas I was inviting her to paint with her own guilt. And fascinating. That was the cruelest part. It was cold, clinical, detached. It told her I was no longer her heartbroken husband. I was an observer in a legal case. My thumb hovered over the send button. I knew this was a point of no return. The loving marriage, the carefully constructed life, the man who trusted his wife implicitly. All of that would be gone the second I sent this. This wasn't a message to my wife anymore. It was a declaration. I pressed send. The small delivered receipt appeared beneath the text bubble. The trap was set. And I had a feeling I wouldn't have to wait very long for it to spring. The silence after I sent the text was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was heavy, filled with a terrible potential. But I didn't have to wait in it for long. It wasn't a minute. It wasn't even 30 seconds. My phone screen lit up, illuminating the darkroom. Her face, smiling from a photo we took on our last anniversary, was flashing on the screen. The caller ID read, "Ashley." My thumb twitched, muscle memory wanting to answer the call from my wife. But the architect, the strategist, held it back. I let it ring, and ring, until the call finally gave up and diverted to voicemail. This was the test. Her reaction would tell me everything I needed to know. A notification popped up, "New voicemail." Before I even had a chance to listen, my phone was ringing again. She wasn't waiting. I let the second call die, too. And then a third. The frantic pace was all the confirmation I needed. My single sentence had hit its target with surgical precision. Finally, when the phone fell silent, I opened my voicemail and put it on speaker. Her voice filled the empty room, and it was a completely different person from the bubbly, carefree woman on Instagram. Her first message was shaky, laced with a confusion that was clearly feigned. "Hey Jake. Got your text. I don't get it. What's that supposed to mean? Call me." The second voicemail, left just a minute later, was different. The confusion was gone, replaced by a sharp, defensive anger. Seriously, Jake? You're not answering now. What the hell is that supposed to mean, an attorney? Are you threatening me? This is insane. Call me back now. It was a performance, an attempt to seize control by going on the offensive. But it was the third voicemail that was the most telling. The anger had completely dissolved, leaving only the raw, unmistakable sound of pure panic. Her voice cracked. Jake, please. Please pick up the phone. Okay. Please, we need to talk. I can explain. Whatever you're thinking, I can explain. Just answer the phone, Jake. Please. I sat there in the dark, listening to my wife's composure completely disintegrate hundreds of miles away. There was no triumph, no joy in it. Just a grim, chilling satisfaction. I had pulled on a single loose thread, and her entire fabricated world was unraveling before my very ears. The call stopped, but then my screen began to light up again, this time with a rapid-fire assault of text messages, each one more frantic and desperate than the last. She was caught in the trap. And now, I knew it was time to find out just how deep it went. My phone screen was a wall of desperate texts from Ashley. Jake, this is a huge misunderstanding. You're twisting things. Please, just talk to me and I can explain everything. It was a classic attempt to muddy the waters, to pull me into a vortex of emotional arguments where she could use my feelings against me. But I wasn't going to engage. Arguing with her would be like arguing with a ghost. I needed facts. I needed evidence. And her entire alibi was resting on one simple premise: that she was in Miami with her friends. Her friends, Chloe and Megan. They were the pillars holding up her story. If I could knock one of them out, the whole thing would collapse. Calling them directly was a non-starter. They would have their story straight and would cover for her in a heartbeat. But their husbands, they were a different story. Especially Mark, Chloe's husband. Mark's a good guy, an accountant, plays golf with me a couple of times a year. He's a straight shooter. He was the weak link. I took a deep breath, scrolled through my contacts and tapped his name. I tried to make my voice sound as casual and friendly as possible when he answered. Hey Mark, Jake Miller here. Sorry to call you a bit late. Hope I'm not interrupting anything. Not at all, man. What's up? He said, sounding cheerful. This was it. I set the trap. Hey, just a quick one. Ashley's down in Miami with Chloe and she was talking about maybe extending her trip by a few days. I was just wondering if Chloe was planning on staying longer too. Just trying to get a handle on our schedule for next week. I held my breath, waiting for his reply. Mark's response was immediate, innocent, and absolutely devastating. He chuckled. Miami. Man, I wish. No, Chloe got back 2 days ago. She's been practically hibernating on the couch ever since. Said she was completely wiped out from the weekend. I thought Ashley flew back with her. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I forced a laugh, my voice sounding hollow and strange in my own ears. Oh, you know what, I must have gotten my dates mixed up. Total brain fog from work. My bad, man. Anyway, good talking to you. We exchanged a few more pleasantries before hanging up. I put the phone down on the table, my hand shaking slightly. That was it. The final, undeniable confirmation. The girl's trip was a lie. The friends were a lie. She had been in Miami on her own, for at least the last 2 days. Her panicked calls weren't just about my text. They were the terror of her entire alibi being vaporized in an instant. The question was no longer just about who she was with. It was about what she was doing that required such an elaborate, multi-person deception. The lie wasn't a crack in the foundation anymore. A wrecking ball had just smashed through the wall. And now I was starting to see what was hidden inside. The phone call with Mark was the tipping point. The emotional part of my brain, the part that felt hurt and betrayed, went silent. A cold, calculating calm took over. This was no longer a domestic dispute. It was a conspiracy, and my wife was the prime suspect. Deceptions this elaborate aren't just for hiding a simple affair. They're for hiding something much bigger. And big secrets always follow the money. I went to my office, the glow of the monitor pushing back the darkness of the house. This was no longer about casually checking a credit card statement. This was a deep dive, a forensic audit of our entire financial life together. I opened a spreadsheet and began the methodical work of logging into every account we shared. Checking, savings, credit cards, investment portfolios. I downloaded months of statements. My architect's eye for detail now searching for anomalies and patterns. It didn't take long to find them. The first thread I pulled was the hotel. She had sent me a link weeks ago to the trendy, fun hotel in South Beach where the girls were supposedly staying. But the charge on our credit card wasn't from there. It was from a place called the Seta, a completely different hotel in a quieter, far more exclusive part of the beach. It wasn't just a room either. The charge was for a private one-bedroom suite, for 7 nights, totaling over $10,000. This trip wasn't a spontaneous decision. It had been meticulously planned behind my back for weeks. Then I moved to our joint savings account. This was our nest egg, the money we were putting aside for a down payment on a future vacation home. Over the past month, I found a series of 3 cash withdrawals, each for the maximum daily limit of $5,000. 15 grand, pulled out in cash. Not transferred, not spent on a card, but turned into untraceable paper money. My stomach churned. This wasn't vacation spending. This was off the books, hide it in a briefcase money. But it was the final discovery that made me physically recoil from the screen. Buried among the Miami charges, I found the one I had been dreading ever since I saw the steakhouse receipt. A charge from a luxury watch boutique in the Bal Harbour shops. The amount was $15,250. It wasn't a purse or a pair of shoes for herself. It was a Rolex. You don't buy a $15,000 watch for a casual fling. That's an investment. That's a down payment. That's a transaction. I leaned back in my chair, the screen illuminating a spiderweb of financial deceit. The expensive suite, the drained savings, the luxury watch. This was so much more than cheating. I was looking at evidence of a massive, calculated financial betrayal. I was no longer just a husband uncovering an affair. I was the victim of a crime. And it was time to call my lawyer, not as a threat, but as an absolute necessity. I sat there staring at the damning spreadsheet, the digital proof of my marriage's collapse. The numbers didn't lie. For a moment, the sheer scale of the betrayal washed over me, and I felt like I was drowning. This was fraud. This was theft. This was a level of deception so profound I couldn't navigate it alone. My bluff about my attorney had to become a reality. I needed my friend, David Chen. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, my heart pounding in my chest. It was after midnight, but I knew he was probably still working. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual and laced with its usual late-night energy. "Jake. Hey man, everything all right? You're burning the midnight oil." I took a breath. "David, I need you to listen to me. And right now, I need you to be my lawyer, not my friend. Can you do that?" The line went quiet for a second. The casual tone in his voice vanished, replaced by a sharp focus. "I'm listening," he said. "Go." And so I laid it all out. I didn't yell or break down. I presented the facts with the same detached precision I would use to describe a building's structural flaws to a client. I walked him through the timeline, the Miami trip, the innocuous social media posts, the red flag of the steakhouse dinner, and the text about extending the trip. I told him about the calculated reply I had sent, and he let out a low whistle. I described Ashley's subsequent panic, the frantic calls and voicemails, and the confirmation from Mark that her friends had been home for days. And then I walked him through the financials, the secret 5-star hotel suite, the $15,000 in cash she'd siphoned from our savings, and the Rolex. When I finished, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," David finally said, his voice grim. "Wow. Okay, Jake. This is bad. But you did the right thing by calling me. Here's what you're going to do. First, and I am not kidding, you stop all communication. Do not answer her calls, do not reply to her texts. Let her spin out. From this moment on, I am the only person you talk to about this." He continued, his voice crisp and commanding. "Second, first thing tomorrow morning, you go to the bank. You open a new account in your name only, and you transfer exactly half of every dollar from your joint accounts into it. We protect your assets immediately. Third, keep documenting everything. Every screenshot, every statement, every timeline. We need a perfect, undeniable paper trail. I scribbled notes on a pad, my hand moving with a renewed sense of purpose. The fear and confusion I'd felt just moments before were being replaced by a clear, actionable plan. The conversation was no longer about saving my marriage. It was about surviving it. My once hypothetical, fascinating story was now case file. Miller versus Miller. And with David's guidance, I was ready to follow the evidence wherever it led. Following David's instructions became my new religion. The next morning, I was at the bank the moment it opened, my face a stoic mask as I went through the cold procedural steps of severing our financial lifeblood. All the while, my phone was a constant buzz of notifications from Ashley. The texts had shifted from panic to pleading, then to anger again. It was all just noise. Per David's orders, I ignored every single one. Each unanswered call, each unread text, was a small act of reclaiming my power. My evenings were now dedicated to a single task: documenting. Armed with a lawyer's mandate, I returned to the place where the lies had been so carefully constructed: social media. But I wasn't looking at it as her husband anymore. I was an investigator, searching for the digital ghost in her machine. I wasn't just looking at her profile. I was scouring the location tags of the places she'd been, looking through the public posts of strangers who had been at the same clubs, the same restaurants. I was hunting for a mistake. 4 hours, I found nothing. And then I got a break. I was scrolling through the tagged photos of a high-end beach club in Miami's south of 5th neighborhood, a place far more exclusive than the tourist trap she had been posting from. I scrolled past dozens of photos of champagne and sunsets, and then I froze. There she was. It was a group photo on the deck of a sleek private yacht. Ashley was in the background, but she was unmistakable. She was laughing, looking radiant. And she was not with Chloe or Megan. Her hand was resting on the chest of a tall, impossibly handsome man with slicked back hair and a smile that looked like it was worth $1 million. His arm was draped around her waist with an easy, possessive confidence. The person who posted the photo had tagged a half-dozen people in it, including my wife. And the man. His tag read, Liam Vanderbilt. My heart hammered in my chest. I moved to screenshot it, and as my fingers fumbled with the buttons, I saw it happen in real time. The little black tag with Ashley's name on it simply vanished. She was online. She was actively scrubbing her digital footprint, erasing any connection to this man. It was the act of someone with a lot to hide. But she was a split second too late. I got the shot. The screenshot sat on my phone screen, a perfect little piece of undeniable evidence. Her, him, the yacht, and his name, all preserved forever. She could untag a photo, but she couldn't erase the truth. I finally had a face and a name for my wife's betrayal. Liam Vanderbilt. My investigation was about to go much, much deeper. The screenshot was my Rosetta Stone. With the name Liam Vanderbilt, I finally had the key to unlock the entire mystery. My focus shifted from Ashley's social media to the vast, deep ocean of the internet. I left the curated world of Instagram and dove into the cold, hard data of Google, LinkedIn, and news archives. It was time to find out who this man really was. His public persona was exactly what you'd expect. His LinkedIn profile painted him as a visionary, the founder and CEO of Vanderbilt Equities, a boutique firm specializing in disruptive tech and luxury real estate. It was a masterpiece of corporate buzzwords, designed to sound impressive while saying absolutely nothing of substance. His Instagram was even more obnoxious, a highlight reel of a life rented for show. There he was, posing in front of a private jet, at the wheel of a rented Lamborghini, and in a particularly infuriating shot, showing off a new Rolex that looked suspiciously familiar. He wasn't living a life. He was selling a fantasy. But I dug deeper, past the glossy surface he presented to the world. I scrolled past the fawning articles in minor business publications and looked for the cracks. I found them in the comments sections of old articles and on obscure financial forums. The real story began to emerge. Liam Vanderbilt was a serial entrepreneur whose ventures had a spectacular habit of burning brightly for a short time before collapsing, leaving his investors with nothing. He was a financial predator, a chameleon who charmed his way into wealthy circles and drained the bank accounts of anyone naive enough to believe his promises of impossible returns. And then, all the puzzle pieces crashed into place with sickening clarity. The $15,000 in cash she had drained from our savings. That was her investment. The five-star hotel suite was her stage, the price of admission to his world. And the Rolex. The Rolex wasn't a gift of passion. It was her down payment. It was her collateral to prove she was a serious player. This was never about love. It was a business transaction. My wife, Ashley, hadn't run off to have a romantic affair. She had liquidated our life savings, our future, to buy a seat at a con man's table. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was using me as her personal line of credit for a high-stakes gamble. The betrayal was so much deeper than I could have ever imagined. She hadn't left me for another man. She had partnered with him in a scheme to defraud her own husband. The picture was finally complete, and it wasn't a love triangle. It was a conspiracy. The days that followed my discovery about Liam Vanderbilt were quiet. I had followed David's instructions to the letter. 50% of our liquid assets were now secure in an account under my name only. And I maintained absolute radio silence. Her calls, which had numbered in the dozens, slowed to a trickle and then stopped altogether. The frantic texts gave way to angry accusations, then to desperate pleas, and finally to nothing. This, David had told me, was the signal. Her financial lifeline, my financial lifeline, had been cut. The fantasy she had bought into was hitting the one obstacle it couldn't overcome, a zero balance. She wasn't coming home because she was remorseful. She was coming home because the transaction had failed. I didn't know what day or what time, but I knew she was coming. I felt it. I came home from work on a Thursday afternoon, and the air in the house just felt different. It was heavy, charged with anticipation. The final act was about to begin, and I would not be caught unprepared. I spent an hour in my office, not in a flurry of panic, but with a calm, methodical purpose. I printed everything. The credit card statements, with the hotel suite and the Rolex purchase highlighted in yellow. The savings account statement, showing the $15,000 in cash withdrawals. And finally, a crisp color copy of the screenshot. Ashley on a yacht, wrapped in the arms of Liam Vanderbilt. I didn't scatter them on the table for dramatic effect. I simply slid the papers into a plain manila folder. There was no emotion in the act. It was the same way I would compile a project file for a client. It was a collection of facts, of evidence, of cold, hard truth. Then I went into the living room, sat in my favorite armchair, and placed the folder on the coffee table in front of me. And I waited. 2 hours later, I heard the sound I'd been expecting. The familiar scrape of a key in the front door lock. The door swung open, and Ashley stepped inside, dragging a suitcase behind her. She looked exhausted, frayed at the edges, her confident social media persona completely stripped away. She looked up, her eyes scanning the room, and I could see the speech she had rehearsed forming on her lips. She was expecting an empty house, or maybe a screaming match. She was prepared for a fight. She was not prepared for what she saw. Me sitting there perfectly still. My face was calm, betraying no emotion. She opened her mouth, but the words caught in her throat. Her gaze had dropped from my face to the object resting between us. It was just a plain, unremarkable manila folder. But in that silent, heavy moment, she knew it contained the complete and total destruction of her world. The performance was over. All that was left was the evidence. She finally broke the silence, her voice a fragile mix of indignation and fear. It was her last stand, an attempt to seize control of the narrative. "Jake, what is all this? I've been trying to reach you for a week. I was worried sick and you've been sitting here." "What?" "Plotting. You froze our accounts. I was stranded, Jake, completely stranded." I didn't answer her accusations. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage with the fiction she was trying to create. I simply leaned forward, my movements slow and deliberate, and picked up the manila folder. The quiet click of the metal clasp echoed in the silent room. I slid the first paper out and pushed it across the polished surface of the coffee table. It was the bill for the suite at the Seta Hotel. "You weren't stranded, Ashley," I said, my voice perfectly level. "You were staying in a $10,000 hotel suite. A suite, I might add, that you booked 3 weeks before you even left Austin." Her eyes darted down to the paper, and her breath hitched. She opened her mouth to argue, but I slid out the next document. The savings account statement with the 3 $5,000 cash withdrawals highlighted. "And you weren't out of money," I continued, my voice still calm. "You had $15,000 in cash. Our savings." I gave her no time to recover. The next exhibit was the credit card statement. I tapped my finger on the charge from the Ball Harbor shops. "A savings account you used to buy a very generous $15,000 gift for someone." Her face was growing pale. The anger was gone, replaced by a dawning horror. I looked her dead in the eye. "I spoke to Mark, Ashley. He told me Chloe has been home since last Sunday. So my question is, who exactly was on your girls' trip?" I didn't wait for an answer. I slid the final piece of evidence across the table. The color printout of the screenshot. Her on the yacht, in the arms of a smiling stranger. "But maybe I don't need to ask you," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. "Maybe I should just ask Liam Vanderbilt." That was it. That was the final blow. The sight of the photo of his name shattered the last of her composure. The color drained completely from her face. She physically slumped back into the armchair behind her, her body deflating as if the strings holding her upright had been cut. There was no fight left in her eyes. No defiance. There was nothing. The lies were all gone, and all that remained in the room was the quiet, ugly truth, spread out on the table between us. Her story hadn't just collapsed. It had been systematically and completely demolished. The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by the sound of Ashley's quiet, ragged breathing. She stared at the papers on the table, not as evidence anymore, but as the wreckage of her own choices. There were no more tears, no more anger, just the hollowed-out look of total defeat. When she finally spoke, her voice was a near whisper, stripped of all its usual charisma. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she murmured, and then the whole pathetic story came tumbling out. It didn't start as an affair. It started, she claimed, as a business opportunity. She'd met Liam Vanderbilt at a marketing conference 6 months ago. He wasn't some charming suitor who swept her off her feet. He was a predator who smelled her ambition and dissatisfaction. He sold her a story about a new financial tech startup, dangling promises of ground-floor investment and tenfold returns within a year. He convinced her that this was her one big chance to escape our comfortable, predictable, and, in her eyes, boringly suburban life. "I was doing it for us, Jake," she said, the word sounding weak and pathetic even to her own ears. "I was going to triple our savings. We could have finally bought that vacation home in Santa Barbara you always talked about. I wanted to surprise you. The trip to Miami was the final stage of the deal. The suite, the expensive dinners, the Rolex. It was all part of the image she had to project to be taken seriously as an investor. The extended trip was because Liam was dragging his feet, holding out for more money. And my text. My single calculated text had sent her world into a tailspin, but not for the reason I first thought. When she saw the word attorney, her first fear wasn't that I had discovered an affair. It was that I had somehow discovered the money transfers and put a legal freeze on our assets. She panicked because she thought I was about to blow up her deal moments before she could hand over the cash. I listened to the whole sordid tale without saying a word. The woman in front of me was a complete stranger. This wasn't a story of a wife who fell in love with someone else. This was the story of a partner so deeply ashamed of the life we had built that she was willing to burn it to the ground for a fantasy peddled by a cheap con man. The betrayal was somehow worse. It wasn't a crime of passion. It was a business decision. She finally stopped talking, leaving only the empty echo of her greed hanging in the air. She hadn't cheated on me for love. She had cheated on me for a PowerPoint presentation and a phantom payday. She hadn't just broken our vows. She had tried to liquidate them. There was nothing left to say. In the end, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply looked at this stranger sitting in my living room and told her to pack a bag and leave. I told her that my lawyer would be in contact with hers. The finality in my voice was absolute. She didn't protest. She just nodded, a hollowed-out shell of the vibrant woman I thought I had married, and walked out of my life. The divorce was exactly what David Chin promised. Swift and brutal. The manila folder, my collection of carefully documented evidence, made any argument on her part impossible. The financial infidelity was clear-cut. The money she had taken, the money she had gambled away on her con man, was deducted directly from her share of the settlement. There was no dramatic courtroom battle. It was just a quiet, systematic dismantling of a life on paper. I heard later through the grapevine that Liam Vanderbilt's startup evaporated into thin air, right along with Ashley's and my money. He was a ghost, and she was just another one of his victims, left with nothing but the consequences of her own greed. She had traded a real life for a fantasy, and in the end, was left with neither. Now, 6 months later, I'm standing in the middle of our living room. My living room. It's empty, filled with cardboard boxes and the echo of a life that's over. I'm selling the house. For a long time, I thought this house was the foundation of our perfect life. But as an architect, I've learned a devastating lesson. A structure is only as strong as the materials you use to build it. And our marriage was built on a facade of happiness, not a foundation of trust. Packing up this life is painful. I see ghosts in every room. But with every box I tape shut, I feel a little bit lighter. I'm not just packing away dishes and books. I'm packing away the lies, the expectations, the crushing weight of a perfect life that was never really mine. It's a sad kind of freedom, but it's freedom nonetheless. I'm starting over, with a new set of blueprints. This next life I build will be smaller, quieter, and maybe a little less perfect to the outside world. But it will be built on the one material that truly matters, the truth. And it will be built to last. And that's how a single text message brought my entire world crashing down, only to set me free. Thank you for listening to my story here on Ken's Story. If you've been through something similar, or if you just found this story compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content. Most importantly, let us know your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? We appreciate every one of you. Until next time.